Hello everyone. A little out of left field, but I wanted to make a video about Star Wars The Old Republic, one of the most expensive games ever made, and one of the most ambitious and longest RPGs that I've played. Uh, I played this back when it came out. I put a lot of time into this game, and I've played, as you can see here on the left, I've played all of the classes except for the Sith Inquisitor and the Trooper, the Republic Trooper. So I am missing part of the picture here, but I've seen most of this game. Like, most of what this game has to offer, I have seen. I've played these characters quite a lot. I'm actually going to log in right now and give you the hours. Hopefully I don't get copyright struck by the sound of a lightsaber. Not that that matters, because, I don't care about money as long as the video doesn't get taken down. So, slash played 44 days and 22 hours. Now, those are scrub numbers compared to a lot of people that play a lot of World of Warcraft, that have been playing it since, Vanilla or the Burning Crusade. There are people that have played a lot of MMOs, or put a lot of time into MMOs. So, it's a lot of time for me, though, because I'm not really an MMO guy, necessarily. I'm more of a single-player guy. This is why I got into this game, but I didn't really get into other MMOs so much. I eventually got into World of Warcraft more, but it took a while. It took me a bit to kind of understand, I guess, the point of World of Warcraft and the sort of, the lore. There's a lot to take in with World of Warcraft. There's a lot of, background information and stuff like that. For Star Wars, I already knew going in, and I'd already played KOTOR, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the single-player game that basically leads into this MMO. I had played Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1, I had played 2 later after I finished the MMO, but 2 is much, much better than 1, in my opinion, and I think that opinion is shared by most people that are hardcore Star Wars fans at this point. So KOTOR 2 is huge. I would say KOTOR 2 is the best story that, it's probably the best Star Wars story that I've ever seen. I think it's better than any of the movies, Empire Strikes Back, forget about it. Like, I think it's better than that, because it's doing a lot more, when it comes to, like, spirituality and the Force, and, philosophy, and, just Krea's strange morality, I guess, and her interpretation of the Force. It's very unique. So that puts KOTOR 2 in a very unique position. So I would say, definitely before playing this game, I would recommend playing KOTOR 1 and 2, but you don't have to, necessarily. You can play this game as just a standard, everyday Star Wars RPG. You could just play this game like it's, I don't know, Skyrim or something. It's wish fulfillment, escapist, I want to be a character in the Star Wars universe fantasy. It 100% fulfills that. I made an Imperial Agent character recently. The Imperial Agent is one of the classes in this game. They on the Republic, they had the Republic Trooper and the Smuggler as non-Force using classes, and on the Empire they had the Bounty Hunter and the Imperial Agent, but they didn't have the Imperial Stormtrooper as a class. But I got, like, really cool Stormtrooper armor from, like, rep grinding on one of the planets in the game, and so I was really satisfied with that. So I loaded up my Imperial Agent character. I gave him Stormtrooper armor. I dyed it. I colored it. And, like, it was really fun Stormtrooper RP, and it really did support it quite well, as well, because later on in the Imperial Agent story, it becomes more military and less about Imperial intelligence as it kind of goes on, and especially when you get into the expansions, you become sort of a commander, and a lieutenant before that, so, or after. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. My main class in the game was the Jedi Consular, this character. This was the character I made back at launch, and I did raiding on this guy. I remember joining a guild at the time, and the guild was called End of Days, and we ran Eternity Vault, which was the first raid in the game, and I remember wiping on that. And I remember wiping is where all your guys die, like everyone dies, and it's a failed boss attempt. I remember dying and several wipes that happened when we were attempting that raid, but I remember the bosses having enrage timers where if you didn't kill the boss fast enough, it would enrage, and then it would just wipe your whole party. It would take everyone out. It would kill everyone in the party. And I remember one time there was a guy that he was playing a Jedi Sentinel, which is a Jedi class that uses 2 lightsabers, and they're like a Fury Warrior from World of Warcraft. They just do strong DPS, and he was the last guy standing, and I don't know if he had potions or if he had like a stim pack or a med pack or something, but he buffed up, and he really like hammered the boss, and it was the enrage timer was going down, and the enrage timer went off, and it's just killing everyone. And he's the last man standing, and the last guy standing fighting the boss is a guy with 2 lightsabers fighting this giant like rancor looking thing in like a volcano pit, like it's in like there's lava everywhere, like it's in episode 3, and he's fighting this rancor on fire with 2 lightsabers, and he barely killed him. And I remember being there on Ventrilo back in the day, or TeamSpeak, I forget which, and he killed it, and everyone cheered, and he said, I'll never forget, he said, "Now where's my lap dance?" was what he said. And everyone laughed and cheered, and it was a fun moment of like, wow, like that was awesome. So that's a memorable moment that stays in my mind, and things like that are what people play MMOs to feel, to achieve. And also, you know, on the PvP side, you have that sort of thing as well. Star Wars always kind of failed to meet that, or to fully scratch that itch, and that got worse as the expansions progressed. But for someone that hadn't played World of Warcraft, and at the time, you know, when Star Wars had come out, it was towards the tail end of Cataclysm for World of Warcraft, and they were about to enter into Mists of Pandaria. And by that time, World of Warcraft was really modernizing and becoming a lot more kind of not acceptable, more approachable, I should say. The height of WoW's popularity was during Wrath of the Lich King, but during Cataclysm, the game became a lot more playable for a wider audience, specifically because they added the ability to track quests. So, for example, you know, you play Oblivion today, or Skyrim, or Fallout 3, or New Vegas. They have quest markers in the game, where they have a marker on your compass or on your mini-map telling you where to go, or even just on your map, period. World of Warcraft, Vanilla, and Burning Crusade was more like Morrowind, actually, and also Wrath of the Lich King. It was more like Morrowind. You had to actually follow directions, and for me, that made those games kind of challenging going back. Like when I tried to play classic WoW and stuff like that, that made it hard for me. And I do like old school RPGs. I love Morrowind, and I love Baldur's Gate, and I like a lot of older games like that, Fallout 1 and 2, for example. So I'm into that sort of thing. But for an MMO, in an MMO, you kind of just want to, like, you know, slog through the content and level up and get to the parts that you care about, you know. And for me, the parts that I care about is the story, or that's kind of what I want, and then eventually get to dungeons and raiding and PvP. WoW's story was a lot more indirect, and they didn't have like a main quest or anything like that, at least until like expansions, sort of, debatably. With Star Wars The Old Republic, it had a main quest. It had a class quest. Another game that had a class quest, or not really a class quest necessarily, but more of a main quest, was Lord of the Rings Online as well. That was a game that I had played before Star Wars, Star Wars was my first proper MMO where I really got into it, but I did play Lord of the Rings Online for a little while, and yeah, Shadows of Angmar is a really great game actually. And that's also a game that at the time when it came out, it didn't have quest markers, but then they added that stuff with Siege of Mirkwood expansion and things like that. So, Star Wars, though, right out the gate, it had good accessibility with all this stuff. And at the time, it was basically at the same level as Cataclysm. It was fully accessible in that way. But it also had like a really good story, and it had these cutscenes, which, looking back, I mean, they were incredible for the time, but they're a little bit awkward. Like they're just disjointed. Now, later on in the expansions, they kind of got more Mass Effect-y in the cutscenes. They got more like enhanced, more depth of field, more like kind of special cinematography tricks that they're trying to do, like zooming in the camera, doing little like, J.J. Abrams like things. So they got kind of better about that, but to do what they did, it was so ambitious to have cutscenes, like Mass Effect style cutscenes with a dialogue wheel. To do that for 8 separate classes that have 8 separate stories. I mean, it was just crazy ambitious. So, like, they couldn't really put quite enough like they couldn't quite get the cutscenes right, unfortunately, but they're good enough where like they're kind of like acceptable to a point where like they're roughly equivalent to maybe Dragon Age 1 cutscenes. They're not as good as like Mass Effect's cutscenes. They're not like all that stylish, or like, it wouldn't be or less cinematic, I guess. It's more like Dragon Age 1. Dragon Age 1, when it tried to be cinematic, it really kind of failed. Like, the first example I actually think of is the sex scenes in Dragon Age 1. If you romance a character and like Morrigan or Liliana or whatever, when you get the love scene, it's really silly. Like it's really stupid looking. And in Star Wars, it's kind of similar to Dragon Age in that way. It feels a little bit disjointed in the cutscenes and in the animations. However, it's an MMO. So, like, for what they were doing at the time, it was crazy ambitious. I haven't played Final Fantasy XIV yet, but I hear that that game is very cinematic and very story-centric with a lot of cutscenes. So, I'm sure it's getting better for some MMOs, but the MMO genre is a little bit, well, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's dead, because MMOs are still going strong, but like new MMOs that are coming out that are a big deal, that's a little dead, because there used to be a time where everyone was out for World of Warcraft. Everyone wanted to kill WoW. Everyone was attempting to be a WoW killer, and then failing, of course. And, that's when you had, Rift and Lord of the Rings Online and Star Wars The Old Republic and, what else? Like, everything, Guild Wars 2, they were all trying to sort of be WoW killers. And in some cases, they even marketed it as such, like, the commercial for Rift, I remember said, we're not in Azeroth anymore. So it was like a very direct reference to World of Warcraft. But this game, it's interesting with MMOs, because MMOs are, in a way, I mean, role-playing games, their origin is cooperative in nature. The origin of role-playing games is Dungeons & Dragons from 1970, whatever. So that was always a cooperative experience. You would play that with other people. Of course, you didn't really have an option. There wasn't really an option for like an AI or whatever. The Dungeons & Dragons experience, I believe, is best experienced alone. I think it's best experienced in a video game where it's alone, because that's the most immersive. I feel like it's most immersive when you're alone. Like you're reading a very immersive book, or you're watching a movie sometimes. Like, there's a social experience to watching a movie in a theater and getting reactions from the audience, but there's also an immersive experience in watching a movie alone, and you're really wrapped up in it and you're really focused on it. That's how I feel, at least. Sometimes I prefer watching movies alone because of that. I like being really like into it. But for role-playing games, the origin of role-playing games is certainly multiplayer in nature, or cooperative in nature in its origin. And so MMOs sort of scratch that itch in a unique way, because it's one of the only co-op role-playing game genres that exists. I mean, you have things like Guild Wars, I guess, or sorry, not Guild Wars, Borderlands is what I meant to say. You have Borderlands, but that's just not really a normal type of RPG. It's not your typical kind of RPG. It's like Diablo with guns, I guess, but like in first person. And then Diablo is the other one. Diablo, I haven't played Diablo, but Diablo was kind of ridiculed by RPG fans at the time because it was like this sort of, what do they call it? Like dungeon hack and slash type, almost like Gauntlet or something. It's just kind of like an arcadey, fuck shit up, get better loot type of thing. And that, for a lot of people, they want something deeper. Star Wars The Old Republic offers something unique in that it is a very story-intensive experience, but it is also cooperative in its multiplayer. Sometimes that works to its advantage, and sometimes that works to its disadvantage. There are a lot of quests in this game that are completely useless, that just have nothing going on in it, really. There's just sort of like nothing quests. And then you also have like flashpoints, which are dungeons in this game, where you're forced to do dialogue. And if you have a guy in your party that is running the dungeon just for the loot, they want to skip the dialogue. They want to spacebar through it. So, like an example here.
Master Jedi, I'm aware that my recent military record might raise some concerns. I want to reassure you that my squad fatality rates have not consistently been this high.
And then you have your dialogue wheel here. If you're in a dungeon and you're running a dungeon and you get the dialogue, you have an NPC character that's like an important character, and you have to talk to him. You have players in it that want to watch the cutscene and be immersed, and then you have people that are running it just for the gear because they're min-maxing type guys. They're sort of like some D&D players call them munchkins or whatever, but it's whatever. Like they're trying to play the game a different way. They're getting something out of the game that the other guy isn't. And so what happens is he's like, he'll be in the chat and he'll say something like spacebar. And he's asking the person to skip the cutscene. So you hit the spacebar and you skip the cutscene.
Yep. My squad's
and that's how that works. So you have this mixed bag, and it's actually really sad sometimes because I've seen people that play this game that have a name like Obi-Wan Kenobi or something like that, or some Obi-Wan reference, or a Boba Fett character or something. And I can tell, well, I mean, I can't tell for sure, but I get a feeling that they are children that are playing this game. They're kids that want to play Star Wars. They want to play pretend. They want to be in the Star Wars universe. Nothing wrong with that. That's what everyone that's playing this wants, you would think. But then there's the guys that are like, I'm playing WoW in space. I'm playing Star Wars WoW, and so I don't have time for this bullshit. And then sometimes they become toxic because of that. They become mean to the players, and it's actually a really sad thing when you group up, and sometimes you see children, or what I assume to be children, or if they're not children, then they're maybe just normal, average Joe, casual people that are just trying to play the game and trying to, play it like it's like, wow, it's like I'm playing Star Wars, like I make my own character. It's like Skyrim, but it's Star Wars, or it's like Dragon Age or something, but it's Star Wars, like. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the whole point of the game. But then you have these other guys they want something completely different out of the game, and they get grouped up with all kinds of people. It doesn't help that the group finder in this game now has all been homogenized, and it's all just one thing, so it's all level scaled. So like the level 12 guys are getting matched up with the level 80 guys, basically, and the 70 guys, and it's all just scaled, and it's like, it just spoils the whole experience. So in that way, Star Wars is really a failed MMO. Another way that this game fails is with the PvP. In World of Warcraft, when you PvP, you get honor. And when you get honor, that honor is like your commendations or your currency that you get to buy better gear, to upgrade your stats and stuff like that, to be better in PvP and to be more competitive with the other players that are higher geared and higher leveled in some cases. But in WoW, what you would do is you would PvP, and you would PvP at lower brackets, lower tiers, against lower level players, and you would get honor, and you would save your honor. You would save your commendations and stuff so you could buy the better gear later. In Star Wars The Old Republic, you don't get that. When you're PvPing at a lower level, you're not given any sort of commendations or anything. You're not given anything to help you gear up when you get to the max level. So you totally get screwed over, because then when you're finally there at the high level, you have low gear rating. You know, you're supposed to have like a gear rating of 300 and something, and you go in with like a gear rating of 200 and something, and you're going to get yelled at, or whispered to, or told, you're going to get told off. And that's just bad game design. So Star Wars has all kinds of problems as an MMO. BioWare they were not experienced with this. They were way in over their head. And it makes this game really tragic, because it's a very ambitious game, and it was trying to do so much. And it would have benefited better from just being a co-op role-playing game. Or maybe something styled a little bit more like Guild Wars, because I know Guild Wars is a little bit more casual aimed in that way. But it was trying to compete with World of Warcraft, and it was trying to do all these things. And that competition with World of Warcraft stays to this day, to some extent, even though it's a dead game. Because clearly they're still trying to appeal to that audience, because those people are still here. Like, the hyper-competitive people, or the people that are, like, endgame gaming, like, they're still here. Because that's the only thing, like, that's the lifeblood of the game. That's what keeps it afloat. That's what keeps the servers online. So, I am actually pretty concerned for the future of this game, because one day when it goes down, what does that mean? Like, do I lose all my characters? I mean, it would be a shame. It'd be horrible to lose my guy that I spent... This is just one of my characters. I haven't played this character since probably 2015 or 2014. I put 9 days and 8 hours in this character. You know? There are characters that I've bought stuff for. You know, you can buy gear. There's like a cash shop with like gear that's like cosmetic. So it's like, you know, oh, this looks cool or whatever. Like, you can get your cool Sith mask or something, or your Sith hood. And I know that stuff is kind of like predatory or whatever, and it is, but for an MMO that failed, they have to keep it afloat somehow. So yeah, I did buy this back in the day, and this was like in the trailer. That's another thing about this game. The trailers are just fantastic. If you ever look them up, everyone's seen those trailers though, so I'm not really saying anything you haven't already heard probably. But the CGI cinematic trailers for this game are phenomenal. So with that, I think I'll talk about the classes a little bit. I'll review them. I'll kind of go down the list. I can't go on too long with this video, I think. I kind of want to keep it a little brief. So I'll try to run through them the best I can and just sort of review them. This is a little bit more of a review than a strict analysis. I do like to analyze things, but I'll just give sort of my review of things and how I feel about the different classes. The Consular is often considered to be a sort of underwhelming or boring class. A lot of people aren't as big into that class. A lot of people tend to prefer the Jedi Knight. I am on the opposite side of that spectrum. I prefer the Consular. I believe that the Jedi Knight has some serious problems that they ran into when they tried a little bit too hard to be Knights of the Old Republic 3. It ties into the Star Wars Revan novel that was written by Drew Karpyshyn, the lead writer of Knights of the Old Republic 1. And there's certain aspects to the way they handle Knights of the Old Republic stuff in this game that was deeply offensive to fans of those games. And some of it I am offended by too. Specifically, a lot of the stuff relating to the Jedi Exile is particularly egregious. A lot of what was done with Revan is also pretty bad. I think what they did with the Exile is worse, but I suppose it is debatable. You could argue that it's just as bad with Revan. I have a friend that would argue that it's probably just as bad as Revan, as what they did with the Exile. And so, you do have a lot of problems with how they did that. They really put Revan in 4 dungeons in this game, or Revan, I shouldn't say they put Revan in it. They put Revan-based content. A lot of, like, heavy Revan, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic references, like heavy stuff that, like, has heavy implications to those games. And some of what they did was not really respectful, or it didn't feel respectful. Maybe it was kind of trying, but it just didn't feel respectful. And that was a huge problem that people had. They made expansions that dealt more heavily with Revan and Knights of the Old Republic 1. And in some ways it's worse, but in some ways it's better. I'm doing this video right now after finishing Onslaught, which was the expansion before the last expansion. So the last expansion was Legacy of the Sith, which I have not played yet. But the expansion before that was Star Wars Onslaught, was what it was called, and I finished it, and I actually really liked it. I think it's probably the best expansion that they did, or the best update that they did. The one before that was Knights of the Fallen Empire, which I really don't like personally, but I know people that do. If you play this game, do consider skipping Knights of the Fallen Empire. You can try it, but don't feel bad about skipping it either. It's not a bad idea to have 2 characters, and maybe have one character that you try it on, and then another character where you skip it. Because if you activate Knights of the Fallen Empire, it's like an expansion that you reach at level 60. When you activate it, you lose all of your companion characters. So in this game, you get a bunch of companion characters. It's like Mass Effect or something. It's like Dragon Age. You get all these guys, and you can take them with you on missions, and you can do combat with them, and you can talk to them in the bar. They'll have banter a little bit. They'll do things like that. They'll interject in a conversation sometimes and add their input. And that's one thing that adds a lot of soul to this game, for sure. And definitely reminds me of the first Neverwinter Nights game, which that game at the time didn't let you have more than 1 companion at a time. In Baldur's Gate, you can have like 5 companions with you. You can have a total party of 6. In Kotor, you can have a party of 3. In Dragon Age, you can have a party of 4. In Knights of the Old Republic 1, or sorry, in Neverwinter Nights 1, and in Jade Empire for that matter, you can only have 1 companion with you. So Star Wars is a little bit more like that. So they give you less companions, but you can only have 1 with you. So they give you 5, but you can only take 1. So that system, I mean, I wish that you could have 3, or a party of 3. I wish you could take 2 companions with you. I think that would have been nice. It would have made it feel a little bit more like KOTOR, perhaps.
Welcome back, Master.
But it's not the end of the world.
If you detect the aroma of Alderaanian nectar, I programmed the air circulators to simulate it. Enjoy.
Apologies. Sorry. Yeah, the droid will sometimes talk. Yeah, so there's all these companions, and they take them away during the Knights of the Fallen Empire expansion, because they did a sort of reboot of things where they skipped ahead several years after the game, after like the vanilla game and after some of the first 2 expansions. So it's set in the future after, and there's a big time leap. So it's like they want you to gather your companions back. And that would be great if you gathered all of your companions back in that expansion. But you don't do that. You gather them back over the course of several updates. They piecemealed them out. And they piecemealed them out over the course of 2 whole expansions. So, or actually 3. Like, I think they were still piecemealing them out at Onslaught, of all things. So, yeah, I didn't, I think I took off his armor to move his armor to another, character. Sorry if you're not watching the video, and, you're listening and you saw that. Yeah, the guy doesn't have gear on. Yeah, so, the companions in the game, they took them all away for that, and that's a huge mistake that they made. So just know that going in, that if you, when you activate Knights of the Fallen Empire, you are going to lose your guys. So that's why it's good to proceed with caution. Don't activate it until you're ready, and have a backup character that doesn't start the expansion. That's always a good plan. Regarding the companions themselves, I really like, because I was talking about the Jedi Consular, I really like the companions for the Jedi Consular. I really think that the way they built up to certain events was really cool. You get a Jedi Apprentice as the Jedi Consular, and when you don't get the Apprentice until later. Her name is Nadia Grell, and of course you can romance. You can do the love story. If you're a male character, it allows you to do that. Which, is just kind of a BioWare staple that goes back to, like, Baldur's Gate 2, back when they had romances in that. And so, like, Nadia, I really like her as a companion. I think that she's really nice, and I like that they build her up. There's, like, character development with her, where it builds up to her becoming a Jedi. The first chapter of the Consular story is kind of unique as a Star Wars story. You're sort of a Jedi exorcist of sorts. The plot of it, the basic plot of it, without spoiling too much, there's a Sith thing that happens where Sith are sort of taking control of other people and infecting them with a sort of ailment that is making them under a sort of Sith spell. And you as a Jedi Consular in the first chapter are going around healing people. So it's like a true healing story, the first part, or like you're playing like a true like cleric or a healer. And I really like that RP, that roleplay. I think it's a really cool concept. Some people don't like it. I understand. I quite liked it. Chapter 2 of the game slows down a little bit, but there's a lot of character development of the girl, Nadia, and build up to her becoming your companion. And then Chapter 3 really takes off for the Consular, and it really goes places, and she becomes your apprentice. And the finale of the Consular, I think, is pretty awesome. There's a cool twist at the end. So I do like the Jedi Consular. It's a very immersive sort of diplomat, like a Jedi diplomat, a Jedi exorcist. Your goal is to, in the first chapter, to heal Jedi that are sort of possessed by like Sith, by a sort of Sith thing. And then in Chapter 2 and 3, you become a diplomat that's like going around to different planets trying to organize a bunch of neutral star systems into rallying for the Republic against the Empire, which is very much like a Star Wars prequel type thing. But I mean that in a good way and not in a bad way. Sort of an Old Republic thing. The game is called Star Wars The Old Republic, and the Consular lives up to that in feeling like a very Old Republic story. And it's very lore heavy. So, if you're really into the lore, if you're really into Star Wars stuff, and you're really into like immersive Jedi stuff, I would recommend that story. The next one I would also recommend would be The Imperial Agent, if you care a lot about lore and story. The Imperial Agent and the Jedi Consular, I think, are both the most lore-heavy of the different ones. The Consular has a better cast of characters, I think, a better cast of companions. I really like the companions overall for the Consular. The Imperial Agent companions, they're very unique. They're very atypical of Star Wars characters, but some of them are a little boring. One of them is definitely like a nothing character. There's like this robot that you get towards the end of the story, and her storyline amounts to nothing. So yeah, though there is some stuff with her in the expansion, in the Fallen Empire expansion. So I would I guess there's that, but I didn't honestly I didn't finish Knights of the Fallen Empire. It was so bad I couldn't finish it, in my opinion. And also, part of the reason why it was so bad wasn't just the story, but the gameplay. The gameplay is very linear in Knights of the Fallen Empire and in Knights of the Eternal Throne. So that stuff was just not so fun. The game, it is fairly open. When you go to these planets, you can fly to different planets, you know. And you sit in the cockpit, you go into light speed here, and you drop into the planet, and you do have, like, a fairly large map. Like, I'm gonna go load up the planet here. I'm gonna walk over here. And, in the meantime, on the loading screen, I'll talk a little more about the agent. The Imperial Agent has a really cool, again, with BioWare and romance stories, they love these, or I guess their fans really love them too. But there's a romance option in the Agent storyline that I really like, where it's not one of your companions. You can have like all the different, like every class has like a love interest, possible love interest type character. But for the Agent, he has a reoccurring character that actually has a really kind of tragic and interesting ending. And she isn't like a companion that follows you around, which I think is really cool. I think it's really cool to have, or I guess it's a little bit unexpected. I don't know if it's, maybe cool is a strong word, but it's just, I like it because it sort of subverts my expectations a little bit, and it's different to have a love interest in an RPG that isn't some dude following you around like Admiral Akbar right here. I like that was the case in the Agent story, and the Agent story has a lot of depth in or a lot of depth is the wrong word I was looking for. I didn't really mean that. It does have a lot of depth, but what I meant was it has a lot of twists. There's a lot of twists in the Agent story. I think that's what it's best known for. A lot of people consider the Imperial Agent to be the best story in the game. That tends to be like a reoccurring opinion. I would say, whether it's the best or not, it's a very enjoyable and satisfying story at times because there's a lot of twists to it, and it's very unexpected. And there's foreshadowing to the twists, and I would imagine that makes replaying the Agent really fun when you know what's coming, and you can kind of see the foreshadowing. So yeah, that's most of what I have to say about the Agent off the top of my head, without dragging on too long about it. The Smuggler, which is the class I'm playing right now, is a fun class. There's a lot of humor, of course. And it's sort of wish fulfillment fantasy, you know, like the Smuggler and the Bounty Hunter are very similar in what they are, because they're both pretty much stories that are meant to scratch an itch for, like, do you want to be Han Solo? Yeah, I do. Then you're given that sort of escapism. And it's the same thing with the Bounty Hunter. It's like, you want to be Boba Fett, you got it. And so that makes those stories a little bit average. They're good, but they're kind of average. because they're competent, you know? They get the job done. But they're not going to necessarily blow you away. And when it comes to the consequences of the greater story and of the greater lore, they're a lot smaller. They're small stories. They're personal stories. If you want the small and personal story, definitely go for the agent, or sorry, not the agent, the smuggler and the bounty hunter. They're definitely in that ballpark.
Vehicle paths are currently open for business.
And to some extent, the Republic Trooper as well. The Trooper is a little bit more personal as well, based on what I know about it. Like I said, I haven't played the Trooper. That's one of the only ones I haven't played, but I have seen a lot of the cutscenes, and I did play alongside a friend of mine that he was playing the Trooper back at launch, actually, back when I played the Consular. The friend that I grouped up with and played pretty much the whole time with, and we PvP'd forever to grind for XP. He was playing a trooper, and I did see his cutscenes here and there, so I do get the gist of that story overall. And it is a satisfying thing to form Havoc Squad. You're like forming a squad. It's very much like Mass Effect 2 story. You're like forming a squad to deal with some kind of Imperial threat. I don't really know the details exactly, but you're forming Havoc Squad is what it's called. And that's the trooper story. And, you know, it's basic. It gets the job done. And the Bounty Hunter, it deals with the Mandalorians a little bit more, which is cool. The fall of Corellia, and this I'll talk about. I'll get a little bit spoilerish here. Towards the end of SWTOR, SWTOR is Star Wars: The Old Republic abbreviated, by the way, in case you didn't know, like KOTOR. When you get to the end of SWTOR, the last planet is Corellia, and in vanilla. And at Corellia, from the Imperial perspective, they kind of whitewash it, or they kind of water it down and act like they won that battle, but they really didn't. The Republic is the one that won Corellia, and Onslaught deals with that, where they go back to Corellia and they try to retake it, but back when the Empire first tried to take Corellia, they definitely failed and it fell apart. And you really see that. You really see why the whole thing fell apart from the bounty hunter's perspective. Because there's this Sith Lord that you take orders from, and he is just like the biggest like blowhard dumbass that just kills his own men and fucks over everybody. It's the Imperial agent has some of that stuff too, where you do see kind of the incompetence of the Sith. One of the things that makes the agent an interesting story, to kind of pivot back to that a little bit, there's an interesting dynamic between the Sith and the Grand Moffs. If you remember in A New Hope, Star Wars 1, the original, there's the part where the one admiral guy starts talking back to Vader. He starts saying, like, you know, your old sorcery is out of date, and your ancient religion is just stupid, and no one cares anymore, old man. Basically, he's talking like that, and then Vader starts choking him with the Force, and he says, "I find your lack of faith disturbing." And then Moff Tarkin says, "Vader, release him." And he waits for a second, and he says, "As you wish," and then he lets him go. That tension between the military and the Sith is really interesting, and it's an ancient tension. It goes back all the way to the Old Republic, because the reality is that the Sith are all about killing people. They're all about feeding their sense of power. They're almost vampiric. They just need to kill to, like, just feed their power. Like, they are tripping. They are tripping on their own pride, on their own passion, as it's said in the Sith Code. And so, because of that's going to create some tension with the chain of command. And I find that really interesting, you know, because it reminds me of, authoritarian regimes in real life, where you have guys that don't want to talk to Vladimir Putin or to Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, who's the guy in China? I'm sorry, blanking on his name. Yeah, like, not Mao, the current guy. People don't want to talk to him because they're afraid that they're going to get killed. They don't want to say anything wrong because they're afraid that they're going to be sent to the gulag, or they're going to be, you know, re-educated or something. Like, they're going to be punished. So everyone's just scared shitless of, like, this sort of unpredictable authoritarian leader, and it's almost like crazy Nazis that are, like, killing their own generals or whatever. It's kind of like that, like, which by the way, I don't know if that actually happened. I'm just thinking of, like, you know, the sort of, like, the sort of Indiana Jones thing, I guess. Like, though I don't know if that happened in Indiana Jones, but it's that sort of thing. You just have, like, these really, really crazy guys at the top that are, they really love to just bully and push around, like, the people that actually make the Empire run. It's like, you know, you're running this whole show. You're at the top of the food chain here, but are you really running the show? Because without us, without your generals, you're nothing. You know, and it's that sort of thing. It's like, you know, Adolf is like, you know, we need to do this, we need to do that, and it's like the general's like, sir, I don't know if this is a good idea. I don't know if this is a good idea to go full scorched earth in this area or something. It's something like that, you know, and it's like, well, we end up doing it anyways, and we commit a bunch of war crimes or whatever, and it's like, well, this created a bunch of problems. Like, it's that kind of thing, and that makes playing a sort of not even a light side, but, like, just sort of a morally gray, like, I make some dark side choices, I make some light side choices. Like, playing the agent in that style really fits. That's how it fit for me. I also really like playing the Sith Warrior in that style, to be honest. However, I will admit, I do have a bias for playing good guy characters. And I don't like playing just blind evil characters that just murder babies and eat children. Like, I don't really like playing those kinds of characters too much. So, if you want to do that, Star Wars supports it probably better than, like, anything. Both KOTOR 1, KOTOR 2, and SWTOR, like, they all support playing an evil bastard really, really well. So, if you want to play an evil dude, you might be hard-pressed to find a game that supports it better than this. I mean, Fallout 3, you can play a pretty evil guy. New Vegas, you can join Caesar's Legion, or go crazy as an independent guy in the independent ending. So, like, Fallout is probably the closest game for that, for playing an evil guy. But Star Wars, I mean, those Sith guys, they're on another level. They're literally Satan. They're nuts. So yeah. So that leads to the Sith Warrior. So the Sith Warrior is interesting because I love playing the Sith Warrior as a guy that's not nuts. A guy that's just, like, kind of an imperial, like, a believer in the Empire, that, like, you know, I was in this situation, I was born into a rich family, I was put into the Sith Academy, and I'm just doing my thing, you know, and just trying to, like, fight the good fight, like, for my country, basically. I like playing the Sith Warrior in that style. There's a lot of room for that. If you play a light side, like a true light side Sith Warrior, like a good guy, it really lets you do it, because the companion, Jaisa, I forget her name. I'm gonna log onto my warrior right now. You get a companion where, in the first chapter of the Sith Warrior story, you're, like, chasing this Jedi guy down. You're trying to track him down. And when you finally get to him, you kill him, and you get his apprentice. And it's like, well, she's yours now. So you can do with her as you wish. Do what you want. And you can turn her light side, or you can turn her dark side. If you turn her dark side, she gets, like, dark side corruption, and she gets all fucked up. And you can romance her. You can have, like, sex with her, and that's only on the dark side path, though. If you go light side, she doesn't want to do anything with you. So it's kind of funny. But I went with the light side path for her. And it was actually pretty satisfying, because she ends up being, like, a good person. So the game has that level of depth almost like Mass Effect 1, where, you know, you get to choose between Kaidan or Ashley on who gets to die at Vermeer. Spoiler alert. Sorry. But, I mean, if you're watching this, I'd assume you're a BioWare fan. So, like, you know, and I love talking about the other BioWare games as well. And I could talk about BioWare's games all day, basically. And, you know, when I think about the other BioWare games, I think that this game holds up. I think that this game holds a candle to some of the other BioWare games. Some of the other titles. And it holds its own. And I think that's incredible. The fact that they pulled it off. And it's really a crazy, ambitious game. I mean, you think about, like, all the different companion characters in every RPG that I've ever played. You know, you have... I mean, I think of JRPGs, right? I think of, like, Final Fantasy VII. You have, like, 9 characters. You have, like, Tifa. You have Yuffie and Eris. And you got all of them. You got all these characters. Cid. You get to, you know, Final Fantasy VI. You have, like, 14 or 12 characters. A lot of companion characters in that game. You look at Dragon Age, you've got like 10, I think. Dragon Age 2, I think, is a little less. You got like 7 or 8. A lot of these games add DLC companions as well, and SWTOR is no exception. You also have, in SWTOR, HK-47 that you can get, or HK-51, who's basically like a DLC companion. You also can get like an Ewok character named Treek, who feels like a DLC companion in the spirit of Shay or Zaid or any of those characters from like Mass Effect or Dragon Age. The Prince guy from Dragon Age 2. It's that kind of thing. And the level of like the amount of companions that are in there. I mean, you have 5 companions per class. How many classes are in this freaking game? You have 8 classes. So, let's see, I failed math in school, right? I failed school in general. I suck at math. So, let's try something basic. Let's add. Okay, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So there are 40 companion characters in this game, added together. Plus 2, if you include the 2 DLC ones that they have there. That are fully fleshed out, that have their own dialogue and everything. And their own, like... in some cases, loyalty missions and stuff like that. I mean, this is a hell of a game. It's a hell of an RPG. There's just a lot in here. And it's not perfect. It's so freaking ambitious. It trips and falls and shits on itself over its own ambition. It fucks up all the time, but it's really a remarkable game. Like, there's a lot going on here. But, you know, sometimes more is less, to be fair. You know, like, I wouldn't say this game blows KOTOR 2 out of the water at all or anything like that. Or most RPGs. Like, this game still isn't as good as most RPGs. But, you know, on paper it is. On paper it's better than everything. But in reality, that doesn't necessarily translate. Because there's so many limitations. Because this game is it's so bogged down by its MMO traits and cliches, and that's unfortunate. You know, you have all these different planets in this game. I mean, you think about how big Azeroth is in World of Warcraft. I shouldn't even just say Azeroth, because you have Outland. You know, you have the Shadowlands and shit. Like, you know, you have all these different places in World of Warcraft. This game has quite a few planets, and quite a few zones. I mean, I'm going to log back onto my smuggler here. Let's get back on the smuggler. Because I want to take a look at that map again for Tatooine. I mean, Tatooine is just one planet. And to be fair, it's one of the bigger planets, I would guess. It's not the biggest planet. I think the biggest, technically, would be, like, Hoth. But that's not, I don't know, Hoth has a lot of, like, bullshit land that doesn't really mean anything. Tatooine is my favorite planet in the game, easily. There's a lot of content on this map. And especially at launch, they took some of the content out. Like, they took some of the quests out of this place. They've really streamlined this game, so it's less grindy now. But back in the day, there were a lot more quests on Tatooine. And this place was huge. Like, when I think of Star Wars The Old Republic as a video game, the first thought I have is probably of Tatooine, because I just have such fond memories of going through this zone. And if I'm comparing this as a zone, like comparing it to other MMOs, like if I'm comparing it to, I don't know, Zangri Marsh, Westfall, Bjorn Tundra, or any place, Grizzly Hills, wherever, from like WoW. You know, if I'm comparing it to all these places, Mount Hyjal, and when I'm comparing it to all these places, I feel like this is a pretty good zone. Like, if I'm looking at other MMOs, I feel like this is a zone that to me is fairly memorable. One quest I like to always do, I almost always do it, is there's a little quest here. It's actually a daily repeatable quest now. I'll spacebar through this. But there's a quest, of course, you know, it's like all the Star Wars trademarks. We get to go to a Sarlacc pit. So, you know, you get to go over there and you get to kill some Gamorreans over at the Sarlacc pit. It's like, you know, that's the whole reason why you're playing this game, right? Like, you want that kind of experience. So you get on your stupid mount. That, you know, from Attack of the Clones, I just get on this this car, and I just drive right over there. And you know, that's the whole appeal of this game, right? That's what they're kind of trying to achieve. I'd love to see more Star Wars RPGs. I'd love to see more Star Wars RPGs that are like single player, that aren't online like this. And man, Star Wars games, like, there's so much untapped potential at this point, especially since EA bought Star Wars and they didn't do anything with it. They really screwed the pooch. Or screwed it up. I don't know who says screw the pooch anymore. Yeah, so they made some huge mistakes, and EA still runs this game, and EA has run this game into the ground. They did not support it with, like, good expansions. Like, this game deserved, like, full World of Warcraft style expansions that were, like, big budget and, like, real. This game never really got that. All the expansions were all, like, mini expansions that are worth, like, I don't know, 15 to 20 bucks. Nowadays, they just give them away with a subscription. They're not even, you don't even buy it. Like, anymore, you don't buy the expansions. So, yeah, it's like, I don't know. So, yeah, thinking about the other classes here. Thinking about, what else? I don't have much left to say about the Sith Warrior. I honestly, like, the Sith Warrior, to wrap it up with the Sith Warrior, I think it's, like, my favorite class in the game is definitely it's a tie between the Consular and the Agent, because they get really deep in the lore, and they get really immersive to me, and I really enjoy those types of characters, especially playing an Agent, role-playing as a Stormtrooper, and, like, wearing that armor and stuff like that. Those two classes are my favorite, and those are my two favorite characters that I made in the game. But if we're looking at the best written overall, the best overall, like, balanced experience, the best experience that feels like a true BioWare RPG, I think the Sith Warrior is pretty damn good. And the Sith Warrior is probably the best that this game has to offer. So I would recommend that. If you're playing a first character in this game, I think the Warrior is probably the best bet. Like, even if you prefer playing Jedi characters over Sith characters, you can play, like, a light-side Sith Warrior, and it's really satisfying. So I would actually recommend, if you're playing this game, play a Sith Warrior. It's the best character. It's the best class. It's the best written. It's just right, the way they did it. Yeah, so I would recommend that. And nowadays, they changed things around a little bit on how classes are done. It used to be that if you were playing a Sith Warrior, you had to play basically like a warrior from WoW, or a Jedi Knight. You play a Jedi Knight, you're playing a warrior from WoW. Nowadays, if I can make a character real quick here. Nowadays, what it is, and this was something that they added in Legacy of the Sith update, you can play any class you want with any character. So the origin story is what it is here. And you pick an origin, and it's like Dragon Age Origins. It's like you pick your Dwarven Noble, or your Elven Commoner, or something like that. And then you pick your class. So you get like a gameplay style. You want to use like the big gun, use that. You want to be a smuggler and be like that type of character, but use like a big gun. You go that style. Vanguard, which used to be like you had to be a trooper to do that. It used to be that you had to be a trooper, like you had to get that story to play that class. But now you can play whatever you want within the constraints of Force and non-Force using. So if you want to play a Jedi Knight that shoots lightning out of his hands, which I know that's a little bit immersion breaking or whatever, but that's what RPGs are. Like, that was the fun of KOTOR, is that you could play like a Jedi that uses like Sith lightning or Force storm. Now it really lets you do that, where you can play any kind of class you want with any kind of story you want. And I think that's awesome. So yeah, you could totally play a Sith warrior in this game and be a Jedi Knight. So the possibilities are, well, I don't want to say that they're endless because that's cliche, but the possibilities are there, let's say. Yeah, so there's quite a lot here. This was what I played recently. I played an Imperial Agent, and I did a Vanguard class. So I played really an Imperial Trooper. They give you different races to play as well. The Miraluka. For anyone that doesn't know, the Miraluka are in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. They're a race of people that their planet was destroyed by a Sith Lord named Darth Nihilus, who did a Sith ritual that basically ate the planet. He consumed the planet in Sith energy. Like, he just killed everything, and he's such a force for like darkness. He's such like a demonic source for like dark side energy that he doesn't even have a face anymore. He just wears this like bone mask, and he doesn't speak anymore. Like, when he talks, like, it's just this Sith language. Like, it's like speaking in tongues or something, or speaking like an angelic language. It's very creepy. Or like a demonic language. It's super, super cool and creepy. And I really like what they did with Darth Nihilus in KOTOR 2. He's a really interesting villain. However, the way they wrap up his story is a little disappointing in KOTOR 2, but it's not too bad. Anyways, this is a race that came from that planet that was destroyed. They're a race of people that doesn't see through their eyes. They kind of just use the Force. They're like a Force-sensitive race. And so if you want to play a guy that, like, or a character that does not see, that just has a blindfold and just sees through the Force, you can do that, which is pretty awesome. You can play a Sith Pureblood, which is the ancient Sith race that came from the planet Korriban, which is the homeworld of the Sith. They are the original Sith race that went extinct, so they're not even alive anymore as a result of this war in the Old Republic era. This war was so devastating by the end of it that the Sith Purebloods were wiped out. The Twi'leks, of course. I forget what those guys are called. That's Saj Ventress race. That's Admiral Thrawn's race, the Chiss. Zabrax, that's Darth Maul's race. And then, if you pay more money, you can play as a Cathar, which is Juhani's race from KOTOR 1. Or, I forget what those guys are called, but that's Ahsoka Tano's race, and Kit Fisto's race as well. I forget what those are called. Man, I'm counting down the days till they add Nemoidians. That's my personal favorite, so love to play a Nemoidian. So, yeah, that's the character building of the game. That's the class character customization. So, yeah, like, yeah, if you're gonna play this game, fuck it, dude. Play a warrior. Play a warrior. You can play a Jedi Knight style. You could do whatever you want. And I would highly recommend that. This game has a lot of free-to-play restrictions, though, just so you're aware. I'm actually playing the game free-to-play right now. However, I've played the game for so long that I've unlocked all the restrictions. You can unlock them through playing the game. So I played the game and just kind of unlocked everything. Back in the day, I did that. Though it's harder to do nowadays because the economy's so screwed up. The way you unlock restrictions is, or a lot of the ways... the way you unlock most of the restrictions is through the auction house, or the galactic market, as it's called in the game. So you do have to, like, play the economy. And the economy nowadays in this game is all fucked up. It's hyper-inflated. Back in the day, man, like, the economy was, it was okay. It was pretty good. Like, I played the economy pretty well back in the day, and, like, I unlocked everything, and oh, man, there isn't much in life I'm proud of, but I'll tell you, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of how I unlocked all the restrictions through in-game currency. This is my player house, by the way. You can get player houses in the game. So, there's a few of them. You can get a house on Yavin, Yavin 4. You can get a house on Manon, which is like a water planet. This is Alderaan. So, yeah, you can get a lot of stuff in this game, and there's a lot of content and a lot of fun to be had. I've actually spent hours customizing this place at times, and my Tatooine house. I have a house on Tatooine. I've spent a lot of time doing that, so that's a whole metagame. That's a whole other side of the game where you can do your little Sims thing, if you want. Though Sims might not be the right comparison. Unfortunately, the comparison might be a little bit more fair for, like, Habbo Hotel or PlayStation Home, where, unfortunately, you have to pay money a lot of the times to get furniture, or, like I said, you have to play the economy. So, I haven't really spent any money in real life on furniture, but, I've been tempted a couple of times, I'll admit, but, I'm pretty content with what I got here. But yeah, anyways, there's a whole market. There's a whole market. This is the whole market where you buy all the stuff. You can get whoa, dude, it's my Boba Fett gear. So, and obviously with the show The Mandalorian, they're playing that up. So, yeah, anyways, back to the topic. Are there any classes that I missed? I'm thinking. Let's see. Consular, Agent, Bounty Hunter I talked about a little bit. I don't really have much to say. Smuggler, Warrior. I have not talked about the Inquisitor. I don't have anything to say about it, other than I think Darth Nox is a really stupid title. They give you a Darth title at the end, and they call you Darth Nox. But, it doesn't matter because you have your in-game name, so, you can call yourself Darth Miku or whatever, like, you can call your character whatever you want. But, in story, they call you Darth Nox when you finish the game, which I think is really, whatever, Latin names. The Jedi Knight, I didn't talk about the Jedi Knight. The Jedi Knight, like I said, I said what I needed to say for the most part. It tried too hard to be KOTOR 3, and that's the biggest problem with it. But I will give a mercy to the Jedi Knight and say that I think Act 1 of the Jedi Knight was okay. So, Act 1 is fine. But then it doesn't really deal with the Emperor. Once it starts dealing with the Emperor in Act 2, that's when it starts tying into the Revan novel, and it starts expecting you to know all this stuff, and you deal with Darth Scourge, who... Oh man, among fans of KOTOR 2, they do not like that character for reasons that I won't get into, but if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. He is really annoying as a character for all that shit. So yeah, but I guess the Jedi Knight, like, if you're picking first classes, Jedi Knight isn't... It's definitely not a bad first class. They made that class with that thought in mind. They wanted that to be the first class that people rolled. That's why they made it the KOTOR 3 class. Like, that's why they tried. I think they fell flat on their face, but then again, I'm kind of in the minority on that. You look up KOTOR, or sorry, you look up SWOTOR class rankings. Like, everyone loves the Jedi Knight. The Jedi Knight is voiced by David Hayter, who voiced Solid Snake and Big Boss, which is awesome. I love Metal Gear Solid, so, like, that was great hearing his voice. I think he does a great job. His voice is, like, totally badass for the Jedi Knight. For the Jedi Consular, it's Nolan North who does the voice, and I love his voice. I actually like his voice a little more for the Jedi, because I think he does a really good, like, Obi-Wan Kenobi style voice, or like a wise sage, like that kind of, or maybe more. I don't know if you'd compare it more to Obi-Wan or Qui-Gon. I feel like it's more like Qui-Gon is kind of what the Consular reminds me of. Feels more like a Qui-Gon Jinn-ish story. Yeah, Qui-Gon Jinn, man. I could make a video about Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon's a good character. Very underrated. It's easy for him to be underrated considering the movie he's in. I get it. But if you're into, like, Star Wars Expanded Universe, Qui-Gon is awesome. And even in the context of the Phantom Menace, I'm kind of a Phantom Menace apologist. I think Qui-Gon's, like, he's one of my favorite Star Wars characters. He's easy top... I was about to say top 5, but I think he's, like, top 3. He's up there for me. Yeah, so that's everything. That's all the classes. That's all the characters. So, yeah. I hope that this was an informative review, and I hope that this helped decide if someone wants to play this game or not. And I hope I didn't spoil too much. Tried to keep it at a minimum. And, I hope this video was satisfactory to whoever out there watched this. So, thank you very much, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Take it easy.